Good evening, my name is Jen and I'm a researcher and podiatrist based in Manchester. And tonight, along with Michael Stevenson, expertly supporting us with the tech side of things in the background, we'll be doing our first Podiatry Research Showcase, in which podiatry and postgrad researchers working in the UK gives an insight into the work that they're doing. Unfortunately, Sally Gates, one of our speakers for the evening, is unavailable, but we still have three wonderful speakers. Each of them will be giving us a 10-minute talk on their project, after which we'll have a few minutes for questions. If you have any questions, please pop them in the Facebook or YouTube stream comments section. And then at the end, after all of the talks, we'll have a little chat if there's any more general questions that have been asked. Okay, so we'll move straight into Victoria's talk, who will be speaking on her project on biomechanical factors in Charcot-Neuro-Osteoarthropathy and deformity.
Hi and good evening. I'm always excited to talk to fellow podiatrists, so thank you for the time to discuss a bit about the research projects that I'm working on. A bit of my background: I'm a podiatrist from the UK and I've worked in diabetic foot clinics for the past 17 years. But last year, a really amazing opportunity was advertised for a programme called Dialect. And Dialect is a European research and training network that's focusing on diabetic foot complications. It's funded by Horizon Europe and is part of the Marie Curie doctoral network. And so the Horizon programme has 11 unique projects that are delivered by a really diverse group of doctoral candidates, from engineers to human movement scientists to public health scientists and clinicians like myself. And we are based and spread across all of Europe. And one of the requirements for these projects is that you had to relocate and couldn't do your PhD in a country where you had lived for the previous 2 years. So all 11 of us have relocated from our home countries, and I'm currently studying in Amsterdam. And together we collaborate on projects, but also get to have exchanges and secondments across Europe to facilitate both our research, but also our personal development as researchers. And so for me, one of my secondments is going to be going to Glasgow Caledonian University to do a population study. And the project that I specifically was interested in and applied for was looking at biomechanical factors in Charcot-Neuro-Osteoarthropathy and deformity. And so, like I said, this programme and project is based in Amsterdam University Medical Centre, and I'm supervised by Professor Siko Bus, Dr. Jaap van Netten, and more recently, Dr. Nina Petrova from King's College Hospital in London. So why Charcot? Well, Charcot foot remains one of the most perplexing complications in diabetic foot management. And despite advancements in diabetic foot care, our understanding of Charcot continues to lag, particularly when it comes to the biomechanics that underlie this condition. And while a lot of the research has focused on the pathophysiology of Charcot, the role of biomechanical forces in the pathophysiology and Charcot foot is still sort of shrouded in mystery. The literature on this aspect is really sparse, and it leaves us as clinicians and as researchers with more questions than answers. And so currently as clinicians, when we diagnose a patient with Charcot foot, at best, we can offer in terms of treatment advice that offloading may be required from anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. And this gap in knowledge not only limits our ability to predict outcomes, but it's also really hampers the development of targeted therapies. And it means it's really hard to give adequate support to our patients. And I think we all recognise that in most medical conditions, such a wide and indeterminate treatment window would be considered unacceptable. So my PhD research is structured around 3 main themes: understanding the impact of Charcot, identifying biomechanical predictors, and evaluating treatment modalities. But today I'm just going to briefly focus on the biomechanical aspects. So a lot of my research focuses on understanding how biomechanical forces contribute to the development and progression of Charcot, particularly in the midfoot. And in one study, we're investigating if abnormal plantar pressures at the onset of Charcot can provide a prognostic threshold for slow remission and greater deformity. So we've retrospectively reviewed patients in Amsterdam Medical Centre who were diagnosed with Charcot, but also underwent barefoot plantar pressure analysis at the point of diagnosis. And while we didn't find a strong correlation between high peak plantar pressures at diagnosis and longer remission times, we did find that if the pressure in the lateral midfoot, which is the area in orange on the EMED picture on the screen, was over 141 kilopascals, that this was moderately indicative that remission would be slower. And by slower, I mean greater than 4 months, which was the average in our distribution. It had a positive predictive value of 64%, meaning that if a patient was in clinic and at diagnosis in this area on the lateral midfoot, their pressures were over 141 kilopascals, that they have a 64% chance that their time to remission is going to be slower. So this could help with identifying patients who are at risk of prolonged treatment. So it helps us to target early intervention and support patients more appropriately. And then upcoming research, we're going to be looking at ligamentous changes, because we know that ligaments have a really crucial role in maintaining structural stability and support during normal gait, particularly in the midfoot and the hindfoot. We also know that soft tissue inflammation and microfractures on MRI precede bone and joint destruction that we see in Charcot foot on X-rays, otherwise known as the stage 0 Charcot foot. So we plan to review MRI scans of early stage 0 Charcot patients to see if it's possible to assess structural alterations in these key ligaments in active Charcot. And if we can develop a detailed picture of ligament alterations, then we can build on that information and start to understand the disease progression and mechanics. Another future study is that we're planning to explore how increased loading and joint motion during walking affects the midfoot stability in Charcot. To do this, we plan to use a multi-segmented foot model, which is shown in this video. And what you see is a healthy person when this model was developed, with little ball reflectors set in various positions on the lower limb. Then a 6-camera system in the gait analysis lab is detecting these reflectors and capturing the joint motions, which we in turn can analyse and collate. Why? Well, the midfoot is the most commonly affected area in Charcot foot. And by understanding the joint motion and mechanical forces at play, we aim to get an insight as to why it may be that the midfoot is so commonly affected. And then finally, looking at the management of Charcot, we want to know what is the most effective offloading modality in Charcot, because international guidelines recommend offloading in a below-knee total contact cast as the primary treatment modality in Charcot. And although TCC is considered the gold standard for offloading, its effectiveness to reduce and redistribute pressure in active Charcot has never actually been evaluated. So we're aiming to do a comprehensive comparative analysis between different offloading devices to assess how effective they are at reducing pressure and by how much in Charcot patients. So we're hoping to begin to address this evidence gap and eventually support more evidence-based approaches in clinic. So in summary, we've already found that lateral midfoot plantar pressures over 141 kilopascals may be indicative of longer time to remission. And hopefully small pieces of the Charcot biomechanical puzzle will be laid out during this PhD and can be built upon by future researchers. Thank you for your attention. And if you'd like to follow all the Dialect Research Group, please scan this QR code for our LinkedIn page.
Thank you very much. That was incredible, Victoria. Amazing. The thing that kind of strikes me is just how much you are fitting into that PhD. Can I ask a little bit more about the program?
Yes,
that is wild.
there is a reason. It's not that I am crazy ambitious and think this is all very easy, but the requirements to get a PhD in the Netherlands is very different from the UK. So my PhD is by publication, and I have 3 years to get 5 publications. So because Charcot is quite a niche topic, I have to do 5 separate research projects to get my 5 publications. So if I could have done some of these projects and got multiple papers, that would have been the ideal. But recruitment's quite difficult. And so for this project, that's why there's so many research questions.
Yeah, that is incredible. So it's 3 years. So do you not get the write-up year like you would in the UK? Is it by publication as well?
So it's because it's funded by Horizon Europe, so the funding is only available for 3, and mine can be potentially extended to 3.5. And then I will either have to, if I've not finished, look for additional funding or have to do it in my own time. But the bulk of the research has to be done within that time. So it's not uncommon for people to write up their thesis after they've finished their funding.
Yeah, I mean, 5 papers is an awful lot to fit into 3 years, isn't it, when you're actively doing the studies? Okay, I have one question that's come through from Abby. So how does the 3D assessment differ from Vicon, or is it the same as Vicon?
So it's using the Vicon system, but what is different is the model. So the model that I'm using is called the Amsterdam foot model, and it's not just a plug for Amsterdam, it's because it's one of the few validated foot models. So the model dictates where the markers are going, but it's one of the few validated models for minimizing tissue disruption, and it captures the midfoot. So a lot of these multi-segment foot models don't look at midfoot mechanics. So that's why I'm specifically looking at that, but it uses the Vicon system.
Okay. And are these skills that you've developed since you started the PhD, or did you have any experience of marking people up before you started, or the analysis systems?
The confession time, I am 100% a clinical podiatrist and very much diabetic foot orientated. So biomechanics has not really been considered in this way since my bachelor's degree, which was some time ago. So it's been a really steep learning curve. But part of being in Amsterdam is that they do a lot of gait analysis. So I've got a really good support network, and I'm collaborating with others who kind of teach me as we go along as well.
Excellent. Marvellous. I think if we get any more questions through for you, we'll save them till the end of the session, if that's all right. We have had one comment from the course saying how excellent your presentation was, so that's lovely. Thank you, Cor. Okay, shall we move on to our next presenter then? And that is Abby Dag, who is talking about diabetes and toe amputations. Welcome, Abby.
Hello. Hi. Sorry, I'm having a few technical issues at this end, and I will endeavour to share. I know I've been showing Michael how to share my slides. I will endeavour to get it sorted as quickly as possible.
Not a problem, Abby.
Are you able to see them?
Not currently, no.
No.
Hi, Abby. It's fine. They're just in the background. If you just go and open up your presentation, that will allow you to get onto it for you. So just open it up, put it into presentation mode, and we'll see the presentation.
I'm sorry, I've gone.
It's okay. It's always the way, just when you go and start up with these bits, we always go through this. You're absolutely fine.
We've got loads of time as well, because we've got one less presenter than anticipated. So,
okay, I've put it on from the beginning from my end.
Okay, so are you in presentation mode?
I'm so sorry about this.
It's okay. You're absolutely fine.
Don't worry about it.
So if you just play the slides, because I've got your screen up on the background. Yeah. I've not shown it up yet, but I've just got it in the sort of screen in the mode. So if you press it up and put it into presentations, if you're doing it as a presentation, that should change up for you.
So I'm bringing up the present screen, and it's coming across with slides and stop sharing screens.
Okay, so have you got it in presenter mode or just in presentation?
not sure. I'm so sorry.
You're absolutely fine. Okay, so what we'll do is, I tell you what we can do,
Hang on.
Abby.
I'm going to upload the presentation. Hopefully that will do it.
Well, I'll tell you what, Abby, I'll put my email into the chat for you. If you email it to me, I'll do what we've done with Alison. We'll take Alison next, if that's okay.
Please
and then
do.
while I get
I'm
that,
so sorry.
I'll come back and get you sorted. Not at all. Not at all. It happens.
Don't worry about it. These things happen.
So I shall, Abby, drop you back off and bring Alison on. And then if you email me that, I'll get it loaded up when I'm back.
Fab. So Alison will be talking to us about what facilitators or barriers exist to accessing foot care for people with advanced stage dementia in care homes in Scotland. A mixed method study. That's a mouthful, isn't it, Alison?
I can confirm, yes, it is.
Feel free to crack on.
Thank you. So, yeah, I am Alison Scott, and as you can see, I am now an adult nurse lecturer at the University of the West of Scotland, but I am a podiatrist, and I'm slowly trying to educate future nurses of the importance of foot health, foot care, interdisciplinary learning and working. As was mentioned before we started here tonight, I quite like a challenge. My working title is, I know, rather wordy. I've played about with this title quite a bit to try and get it a bit shorter, but it's a cross-Scotland study. It started out as a study that was just going to be in one council area of Scotland, and then it was picked up in various places as being quite impactful, and it was decided that we would, between myself and my supervisors, Dr. Gordon Henry and Professor Don Skelton, that we would broaden out to be a Scotland-wide study. This study has become a bit bigger than what I had originally planned for my professional doctorate. However, it is exciting, and it is hoped that whatever we learn as we go along may actually change the future of delivery of care and improve the access to care for people with advanced stage dementia. Sorry, next slide, please, Michael. So, foot care provision for older adults has been identified in numerous studies as an essential service in the treatment of painful nail pathologies, lesions, and early detection and prevention of wounds. Evidence also suggests that a multifaceted podiatric approach may be beneficial for falls prevention. The increasing need for foot care provision amongst older adults is exacerbated in the presence of advanced stage dementia, where people are at higher risk of tissue breakdown, infection and falls, coupled with the commonly found inability to communicate problems as they arise. Despite a clear and urgent need for access to foot care, older adults who reside in care homes no longer automatically receive NHS podiatry care. There's a paucity of evidence existing regarding public knowledge of the high podiatric need amongst people with dementia. Perceptions of the value and clinical benefits that can be attained from receiving foot care remain largely unknown. Next slide, please. So the further rationale for this study is the global population is aging rapidly, and the most common of the age-related diseases is dementia, of which the reported global incidence of diagnosis continues to increase annually. In the UK alone, there are 525,315 people living with a diagnosed dementia. It is known that there's more who are not yet diagnosed. This is a 56% increase since 2010-2011. And as you can see, these figures are already outdated. The actual incidence is now likely to be much higher. Dementia is one of the most common risk factors that necessitates the appointment of proxy decision makers. Next slide, please. So the experience of the person acting as proxy decision maker for people with advanced stage dementia remain largely unknown, and they are under-researched. There is some research in the area, though this is generally limited to the bigger decisions, like if and when to move into a care home and any end-of-life care that may or may not be required. There is very little known about decisions related to the activities of daily living. What evidence does exist overwhelmingly calls for additional support and guidance for the family or the decision maker of those that have received a diagnosis. Next slide, please. The aim of this study is pretty explanatory from the study title, but it is to look at what facilitators or barriers might exist to accessing foot care for older people. Anecdotally, we've got quite a few ideas about what's influencing these decisions. However, there's no evidence, as I say, existing about it. Next slide, please. So developing the study, there were 4 key objectives that have been identified, and this is going to be addressed. As I said, this study grew arms and legs throughout a 5-phase study. The estimated current levels, the objectives would be that estimate the current levels of knowledge and understanding of the role of podiatry and what it plays in the care of people with dementia. Explore personal experiences of decision-making by healthcare proxies for loved ones with dementia. Assess influencing factors in decision-making processes, and to evaluate care home managers' perception of accessing foot care services for residents. You'll see as I move through the presentation, I begin to refer to foot care and foot health rather than podiatry. Part of my literature review, I looked in to see how well podiatry was understood, and we know that podiatry is still quite poorly understood and amongst the general public, so it was decided to use more generalist terms in order to increase accessibility to the study. Next slide, please. Literature review. Topics covered in literature review may change depending on the results and common themes identified. This is a common approach to a literature review in an under-researched area. However, topics already identified include foot problems in older adults, unmet need, public perception of podiatry, delivery of care for care home residents when compared to age-matched community dwelling adults, dementia and care, and experiences of proxy decision makers for adults with advanced stage dementia. Next slide, please. An explanatory sequential mixed methods design has been selected for this study. As I said earlier, this will be laid out as a 5-phase study, as will be discussed in the following slides. Next slide, please, Michael. So phase 1 is exploratory interviews and focus groups. Ethical approval was granted for both semi-structured interviews and focus groups for this phase. This was an attempt to obtain a more depth of understanding of the topic to help to develop subsequent phases of the study. Throughout this study so far, I have encountered multiple issues with recruitment. For this particular phase, it's meant that only semi-structured interviews were conducted. It was hoped that this would not have a detrimental impact on the information gathered, as similar benefits have been found with both methods. Next slide, please. So phase 2 is on to a survey. Data gathered in phase 1 of the study was analysed using Braun and Clark's 2006 reflexive thematic analysis approach, which was used to inform the development of the survey. The survey has already been distributed to all care homes registered for the care of older adults in Scotland, and these were identified through the Care Inspectorate website. It is hoped to recruit a representative sample to increase generalisability of the findings. Next slide, please. Phase 3 is that some participants from phase 2 of the study will be invited to participate in the explanatory semi-structured interviews. This again is to try and capture as much explanatory detail about this as possible. Next slide, please. So this phase went through as an amendment with ethics. Initially, wasn't going to include care home managers' perspective. However, due to the recruitment issues, it was decided to try and increase stakeholder involvement a little more. It was decided that care home managers, anecdotally from my experience, I've worked both NHS and private, it's often care home managers who become involved in the decision-making of who the service providers will be within a care home. So it was felt that inclusion of their perception of the service may give a more rounded account for the study. So the data collection for this phase will again adopt a semi-structured interview approach. Next slide, please. Finally, we'll have integration of the findings. It's hoped by achieving a better understanding of how and why people access foot care for the population of interest, that this may lead to further research and eventually an improvement in access to services long term. Next slide, please. Where we are now. So on to the next slide. Sorry, Michael. Phase 1 is now complete, and I'm in the process of writing up the analysis. The survey has already been distributed, and I will unashamedly ask if anyone knows anyone who is residing in a care home in Scotland who lives with dementia, if they could please get in touch, and I can provide further information and a link to the study. Analysis in phase 1 highlighted 3 key themes. The first of which was awareness of foot health and its impact on general health. You can see some key quotes related to this theme on the slide. Given previous research about the lack of awareness of podiatry, it was really encouraging to see the awareness of the implications of poor foot health and the effect this could have on people's general health. The second main theme was accessing foot care. This again, I found quite an interesting theme. It was clear participants were really struggling to access the service and had been told it was something just not provided by the care home or carers, nursing staff working within the care home. However, some of the participants reported that family members were encouraged that it was okay for them to provide the care themselves. Family members were struggling with this concept a little bit, and we are not trained in healthcare delivery at all perspective. And the final main theme in this section was awareness of care provided by the home. 3 of the 5 participants likened foot care to their family members' haircut. Although basic foot care has been reclassified as personal care, it's quite interesting to see, despite the changes in perception of foot health and foot care and the ultimate impact on general health, people still likened it to a non-health related activity. Within this phase, there were some secondary themes also identified. These included the impact of COVID, general lack of support, and the emotional impact in family. These themes have been included in the analysis and within this chapter in the thesis due to the regularity and frequency that the family members wanted to discuss these issues. However, they weren't deliberately taken into phase 2 of the study, as they do not directly answer the research question. It has been acknowledged that it may well come up in some of the free text boxes, or when we go on to the next stage of interview in phase 3, because people were more concerned and interested about talking about these themes than the foot care, foot health related questions. And finally, if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. It's just a whole load of references.
Thank you very much for that. That was fantastic. Such an interesting area of work, but it sounds like it's been really tough doing the recruitment for the survey.
It has. Recruitment has been far, far tougher than anyone had expected. So as I say, right back at the very start, it was picked up by, the research was picked up by Glasgow Caledonian University, sorry, that's where I'm studying, by their research team, and it was advertised throughout their public publications. They saw real impact and potential of the study. However, actually recruiting people has been difficult. Now, recruitment from care homes is a notoriously hard to reach population group. What possibly we didn't account for is people who are making decisions for others. They're busy, they're often working, they're getting pulled away from work, calls related to their relative, never mind setting aside time to talk to a researcher. And I think that's part of it doesn't matter who I've spoken to, they're like, oh, that sounds interesting. And then there's been quite often nothing's really come of it. So yeah, it's been challenging. I've spent more time than I had allocated for in the recruitment phases. So it's been a kind of stagnant point for a while.
Is that survey still open now then?
It is still open. It's open. I've extended its length it's going to be open for. So it'll be open until January.
Till January, okay. And if there were people, if say somebody's watching and they want to complete the survey, or they'd like to give it to a friend of theirs that they know who has a family member in a care facility, how would they access that?
So it's, as I say, it's been distributed to all care homes in Scotland. I can, if anyone contacted me directly, I can send on the QR code for a link to the survey, and I'm happy to share my email address with anyone at all.
Fab. Maybe we'll put that in the comments section. There you go. Michael just said, you send me the link, we can post it in the comments.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
It's entirely online based, is it?
It is, yeah.
Okay, fab. Really interesting project. You mentioned that you're doing a prof doc.
It's a professional doctorate route,
Yeah. Please, could you tell us a little bit more about that programme?
So the prof doc, the first 2 years are taught modules. So it's effectively a MRes that you would complete in the first 2 years. You don't get the title MRes because the aim is that you go on and complete the PhD section. So you do the top master's level modules and then move into the PhD at the start of year 3. So I'm currently in my 2nd year of PhD.
Right, so you've been there 4 years so far, is that right?
4 years now, yeah.
And how long is the full programme?
Maximum 7 years, but really hoping not to take the maximum length of time.
What's the benefit of doing what's the difference between doing a prof doc and doing a traditional kind of standard?
So the prof doc, because I have continued to work full time throughout, it was looking at other avenues to get into research, but not giving up work. At the time, I didn't work in a particularly research orientated place. So it was a prof doc offered you a cohort type approach, whereby you had people from the School of Health and Life Sciences, engineering, fashion, education, all came together and shared ideas, shared experiences, and it was really good. Unfortunately, I didn't get as much of that as should have because COVID, so we all went online. But we do still have the group chat and we communicate with each other from time to time. And it was because a PhD can be quite an isolating journey. Often you're kind of on your own thinking, where do I turn here? It was to give you that sense of someone else is in this with me.
Yeah, that can be really helpful, can't it? I did my PhD as part of Centre for Doctoral Training, so it was cohort based, and you really do lean on your colleagues. It makes a massive difference. I suppose one of the things with being a podiatrist is you don't want to lose your clinical skills, do you? Because that's what makes us, novel, useful.
Absolutely. Obviously, I've taken that step away from that now.
I was a lecturer.
I'm a lecturer. It's adult nursing that I lecture, so I'm an anomaly in many places. But it's great, and it's opening people's eyes to what podiatrists actually do, and even my other colleagues as well. So I really focus on the research and the interdisciplinary modules, and it's been interesting.
Yeah. Well, I'm very excited for you. It sounds like it's a fab programme. We'll get the link for the survey or your email at least
shared.
I'll
drop that into the chat just shortly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Right, should we pass over to Abby then? You've been keeping us in suspense. How are you doing, Abby? You all right?
It's work. Can you see it this time?
We can see the slides and we can see you.
Excellent. So take 2. I'd like to apologise to everyone for my lack of expertise. IT is not my strong point, so I do apologise. And thank you. So good evening. I'm Abby Dagg. I am a part-time PhD student at Huddersfield University and a part-time podiatrist, podiatry lead at Mid Yorkshire NHS Teaching Trust. The title of my study is a mixed methodology feasibility study to explore the management of patients with diabetes mellitus following a lesser toe amputation. Yet another mouthful of a title, but there we go. So I'd like to first of all explain a little bit about my funding route, because like Victoria, mine's quite unique. Well, I think it is. I applied for interviewed and was awarded the Sarah Jarvis Scholarship. This and the support provided for me by my teaching trust is what basically has enabled me to be able to do my studies part-time. So one of the prerequisites of the Sarah Jarvis Scholarship was that examined one of 3 points. I had a choice of to reduce the risk of ulcerations, to look at the way that we assess patients who do have diabetes, and the education of patients with diabetes. Now, these 3 things were all priorities that were identified by the James Lund Alliance, which is a not-for-profit organisation who examine health priorities, medical uncertainties, and unanswered questions that are set by patients and carers and clinicians alike. I have chosen to look at how we prevent diabetic foot ulcerations in patients with lesser toe amputations. So a little bit about the background of a lesser toe amputation. A lesser toe amputation can happen for many reasons. It can be necrosis, it can be trauma, it can be that the patient's had osteomyelitis, it could be that they've got acute ischemia or sepsis. It is believed that having a lesser toe amputation doesn't affect the way that our foot works and the way that the patients walk. Yet my patients in the clinical aspect tell me otherwise. They tell me that their balance is affected. They're not as mobile as they used to be. But there's no current evidence to support that or find out what's been going on once that lesser toe is amputated. There are numerous studies, as you can see listed here, that have identified the effects that having a hallux or first ray amputated will have on the foot in arch function, balance and pressure redistribution, but not on the lesser toes because, as we can see above, they're not important. So the studies that have looked at lesser toe amputations have found that those patients who have had those amputations, 60% of them go on to have further surgery, whether that be a revision surgery, whether it be further minor amputation or major amputation. Unfortunately, all these studies that I've found are retrospective studies that look at patients' records but don't actually tell us why the patients have needed to go on for further surgery. I did find one paper. This is by Unterfrohner, and I do apologise if I've said that wrong, who examined patients' records and x-rays and found that there was an increased risk of ulcerations on the first and third toes once the second toe has been removed. They found that the distal phalanx, proximal phalanx moves across and pushes against the third toe, which is what causes an amputation. Which causes an ulceration. They did suggest that further studies are required to see how we can prevent this from happening. To date, there's no consensus on how we should be treating patients who've had a lesser toe amputation. Unlike Charcot's, where Victoria's already highlighted, there are gold standards of care, yet there's gaps in that. There's nothing for patients who've had lesser toe amputations, or to be honest, who've had a hallux or a first ray amputated as well. It's all based on our own experiences rather than pure evidence. Hence, this is where my PhD comes in. To establish the effects of a lesser toe amputation on the foot and how we should be providing treatment for that, I've broken my PhD down into 4 parts. So, like Alison, I've taken a multi-phase approach to be able to answer all these questions. So the first phase, again, another shameless plug, I'm afraid. So the first phase is to establish what treatments we currently provide patients who've had a lesser toe amputation. Some of you may already have seen this questionnaire as it's currently being shared on social media and emails, and quite frankly, through any channel I can think of. If you have already answered it, thank you very much. If you'd like to take part, please scan the code here or drop me an email. My email's at the end of the presentation and I'll happily share the link. The questionnaire is purely online and it takes 2 minutes to complete. I am sending it far and wide, so I'm asking podiatrists, podiatric surgeons, orthopedic surgeons, vascular consultants, vascular nurses, tissue viability nurses, diabetes nurses, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, orthotists, whoever may be involved in the management of patients who've had a lesser toe amputated. I'm sending it far and wide. So phase 2 then builds on what I've learned in phase 1. So the aim of phase 2 is to analyse the materials that have been identified in phase 1 to see that they do what we think they do. Because again, as previous, there's no evidence to show they do what we think they do. Likewise, a lot of the silicons that we use in podiatry, there's very little supporting evidence for them. We do have supporting evidence for their use as toe props, but we don't have it as use as wedges in between toes. So the aim, this is where I now tend to work with the engineering department. So I get to use their all their machinery so I can test conformability, compression, deformity, rigidity, and of the materials to make sure they do what we think they do. And also for the materials that we mix together, like your autoforms, to see what's the perfect mix. How much catalyst do I need to put with the silicon to reach the theoretical perfect mix? There we go, phase 3. I don't quite know what I've done there. Sorry about that. I think we've identified my IT skills maybe aren't quite what they need to be. So the third phase, well, for phases 3 and 4, I will be going through NHS ethics and research in order to assess patients who have had lesser toe amputations. So phase 3, the aim of this is to explore the effects that a lesser toe amputation has on foot function. I will be recruiting patients who with and without a lesser toe amputation, and I will be assessing their gait, their balance, their foot function, and then the plantar pressures using a plantar plate to measure pressure redistributions. Participants with and without a lesser toe amputation will be recruited, but they will all have diabetes. I will be collating information on their medical history, their medication, demographic information, their HbA1c, their circulation, sensation, gait patterns, pressure redistributions, and then testing their balance as well, and comparing the results from the two. So please keep an eye out for this in future, but I'm not looking at doing this element of the study until about 2026. This is the delight of being able to do a part-time study, is that I can take my time over all these elements. Now, phase 4 is the final phase of the study, and this will bring in all the threads from the previous 3 phases. The aim of this phase is to establish what effects treatments identified as in phases 1 and 2 have over a 12-month period on patients who have had a lesser toe amputated. I'm also looking at the effects that these treatments have on patients' gait, balance, foot function, and the risk of developing an ulceration. Participants will be recruited who have had a lesser toe amputated and will be allocated to the study group or the control group. The control group will follow the International Working Group Directive and NICE guidelines of treatment, which is nothing, but they will be monitored. And then the control group will have the treatments that we've identified in phases 1 and 2. I don't know what they are yet, so I can't tell you what they will be because I'm still analysing all that data and collecting that data. But those in the treatment group will have a form of treatment. As with phase 3, I will be looking at patients' foot function, gait, movement pattern, balance, and pressure redistribution, and seeing what the differences are between the two. The findings from this study, from this phase, will also then be compared with those from phase 3, where we look at patients who haven't had a lesser toe amputated. This particular phase will last for about 12 months as I follow the patients through their journeys. And I anticipate starting this one in about 2027. Now, as all the patients I'm recruiting are deemed at an increased risk of developing foot complications and ulcerations, there is a rescue arm in my study. Patients who do develop an ulceration or a diabetic foot complication, that will be the end of their journey, but I will record what's happened and why their journey has finished. Also, if they have developed an ulceration, how long after having that amputation, the ulceration has developed. Participants will be treated appropriately and then referred on to the appropriate service for ongoing care. So they're not going to just be left in the middle of nowhere with no treatments or anywhere to go. So in a nutshell, that is my study. As I said, I'm currently on phase 1 of a 4-phase journey, and I'm currently 12 months in to a 6-year journey. So if you do have any questions, please don't be afraid to ask. And if you'd like to take part in the study, this is my email address. I'm more than happy to answer questions and send an electronic link, or if you'd like to scan the QR code. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Abby. That was amazing. It's so well structured, all of these PhD projects. I'm not sure I ever had quite as a concrete idea of where I was going during my PhD. So that's very impressive.
Thank you.
Okay. I also really enjoying all the shameless plugs of people's surveys. It's necessary though, isn't it? You have to get the responses. How are you cutting off at a certain number, or are you just reaching first?
Last time I looked at it, I'm really very giddy and excited about, I had 209 participants, and the neurodivergent in me can't cope with odd numbers, so I'd like it to go up a bit higher. 210 would be fantastic because it's a nice round number. But I've been very lucky and had a lot of support from external bodies. So the BAPO, the British Association of Prosthetists and Orthotists, are considering my application and sharing it with their membership. So, and then there's numerous conferences coming up where I'll be seeing tissue viability nurses, vascular nurses. So I don't want to go cutting off anything just yet.
So, I mean, absolutely understandable. And how easy is that data to analyze? What kind of questions are you asking?
Oh, it's a straightforward 2-minute questionnaire. The majority of them are closed-ended questions with a few open-ended questions. So I have got my notebook with lots of colouring pencils, colouring in various themes as I'm starting to go through the data now. So it's all good fun.
Really interesting.
I have a daughter.
It's a bit different, isn't it?
Sorry?
Phase 2 is really interesting with the mechanical testing of the materials.
I get to play, and I'm really quite looking forward to it.
See that in with making ottoforms, because that's such like a traditional podiatry skill.
It is.
We don't actually see an awful lot of work around.
There's not a lot of work around it at all. Johnson's done a very good paper on toe props, and how that reduces pressure on the tips of toes. But that's really the only one I've really come across. There's lots of other papers in other fields on silicons, but not many in podiatry. Not many in podiatry.
Yeah. And it's something we teach and use a lot. I mean, it's awful. We do all kinds of padding, strapping, ottoforms. Those, it's something I use in my private a lot. You know, people swear by them. So it's really nice. I'm looking forward to reading that. It'll be fun.
So I noticed the question from Tracy. Hi, Tracy. What am I using for my balance? Well, there are 4 at the moment. There's the functional research test. There's a timed up and go test. There is also the grip strength test. I haven't quite figured out which one I'm using yet, but it's any one of those 3 that I will be using to assess the balance and basically grip strength of patients as they walk. But the timed up and go test seems to be one of the most. There's some debate over how reliable and repeatable it is, but it's also, I've got to think of the patient group I'm looking at. It's very easy to access. It's very easy to use, and patients can do it in that clinical setting.
Can you see that
Victoria, one? How many people do you think you will recruit for phases 3 and 4? Not as many as I'm recruiting for my questionnaire. I've been told to be realistic. I think the maximum I'm going to try to recruit is 30 in total. So that's 15 in each groups. But I do appreciate that lesser toe amputations are quite unpredictable. And I do have my patients in clinic do seem to be really enthusiastic about my PhD and have offered to take part. So I've got a list of names, and so far I've got five patients who would like to take part. So that's a good start, but I've got another few years yet until I have to get to that point. So I'm not worrying about it too much at the moment.
You've got time, haven't you? Ooh,
Absolutely.
We've got a question from Cora as well.
Cool. I'm going to try and keep it to just the one, because obviously, potential. I'm saying obviously, it's not obvious. Potentially, balance and gait and mechanics can be altered even further if you have more than one toe amputated. It could be one in each foot, though, and I will be taking that into consideration.
Thank you very much. Should we bring everybody back into the room, maybe, and have just a little chat before we all head off to our evenings? Good evening. Thank you all so much for being involved. I think you all did amazingly. It's nice to actually see you all in person as well. For the benefit of the people who are watching, we speak regularly on the Research Student Network group chat, but we don't often actually see each other's faces. So it's a bit of a novelty. One thing that I have noticed is that you're all on slightly different setups for your PhDs. So
Yeah.
Abby, you're on a part-time one, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
What do you do alongside that then? Because we've all got very different.
I'm a clinician. I still carry on working as a clinician for Mid York's Teaching Trust. So I still have 1 day a week in diabetes running clinics there, and then carry on for 1 day a week in rheumatology. Oh, and then 1 day private practice. So, and family life. And yeah. So yes, there are I'm a bit blown away by the number of different funding streams that are available, the number of different ways you can actually do a PhD. It's quite mind-blowing.
Where did you all learn about the opportunities that you accessed?
Mine was on Facebook. Mine was advertised on Facebook.
Mine was a patient. Prior to moving into academia, I worked in private practice. Conversation with a patient who was a lecturer and talking about research and passion and wanting to make a difference. And she said, "Do you know we run this program? And I think you should apply for it." And here I am.
I had absolutely no intention of doing a PhD, but I really liked the topic, and a colleague had mentioned that this opportunity might be coming up to keep my eye out if I wanted to apply for it. But it was never on my cards up until that point to even consider doing a PhD.
How do you find balancing the clinical work with the academic work? Do you find it meshes quite well, or dependent on your circumstances?
I find I've got to be very disciplined and keep the two completely separate. Because I've got 2 days clinical, that's my clinical work. I'm not allowed to look at my data, I'm not allowed to look at anything. Then I've got 2 days to do everything, and I've got to keep the two apart. Likewise, I might have the odd bit of work, a Datex form that needs filling in. And I'm like, no, you've got to do this on your clinical days. You can't do that on your academic days. Otherwise, I'm not going to get things balanced. Mm-hmm. So I try to be very strict.
And for me, I'm full-time for my PhD, and I can't practice as a podiatrist in the Netherlands at the moment because we left the EU. But I did opt to do full-time for the reasons Abby mentions. I knew I wouldn't have the discipline to say stop in the clinical work. I knew I would always pretend I have to do that. I have to do the clinical stuff. So I didn't think I'd cope with a part-time PhD where I had to balance my clinical and research, because time management is not my forte. So it was a conscious decision to only apply knowing it was full-time. But also I'm contracted, I'm employed as a researcher. So rather than a scholarship, I'm actually employed as an employee through the university and the hospital to do my PhD. So sort of the legal aspects are slightly different.
Yeah, that's a bonus, isn't it?
Similar to the other two, it's discipline. So I work full time, and I have right from the very start. So working 40-hour weeks and then shoehorning bit at a time. So I've got to be really disciplined and set out, look, I want to achieve this. I've got this much time. So less procrastination than what I've perhaps had in previous degrees. But it is challenging, it's difficult, but it's that drive to actually make a difference makes you keep going.
Sorry, can I just comment on a comment that Sarah Jane has put in the chat, that she is also doing a part-time PhD and running a private practice with 3 kids. Yes, it is completely and utterly crazy, but for some reason, somehow we do it and we keep doing it and we don't learn. But let's face it, we all just want to sit with the big fluffy caps on at the end of the day, don't we?
Sarah, we do have, like I say, we have this WhatsApp group chat. It's kind of been added to as the years have gone along through people that we've met through like the universities and word of mouth. I will contact you and we'll make sure that you end up in that group. We're also arranging a postgrad researcher meetup at the annual conference. Good. If you're going to be there, or if anybody watching is interested in joining us, we'll have to find a way to disseminate, to share where we're going to meet and what. I mean, we don't know yet what we're going to do closer to the time, but there will be some kind of plans in action to meet up. But that'd be nice to be physically in a space together. Okay. Anybody got any final comments or any questions for any of the other speakers, or shall we call it an evening? Should we call it a night? Yeah. You've all had busy days doing mad things, managing families and PhDs, so I'll let you get to bed. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us and watching. There may well be another one of these down the line if we can convince some of the other members of the Research Student Network to be involved. Right then, so good night. Thank you very much, Michael, for your wonderful help in the background.